Hello there, Tarky here. Long time no see, and for that I believe I should apologise a little bit. One of the reasons is, quite frankly, there are so many things going on that it's very easy to get overwhelmed. Let's see if we can address that. First off, we had the end of Boris Johnson. Hurrah! It took an awful long time. He survived the scandal of Partygate, where it was unveiled that there were multiple parties which he intended in Downing Street. Finally, what caused his downfall was the attempted appointment of someone known to be touchy-feely, gropey, sexually assaulty to the role of Deputy Chief Whip. Boris claimed that he was not told of this man's record. Unfortunately, it came out very quickly that, in fact, he was, and Boris was still insisting on appointing him. This was too much for Sajid Javid, one lie too many. Even though the Saj had sat on his hands through the whole of Partygate, he did finally manage to find some sort of conscience and resigned at the beginning of July. He was rapidly followed, if somewhat libristically, by Rishi Sunak, and that became a thorough torrent of cabinet ministers of all shapes and forms resigning, saying they could no longer work with a government led by Boris Johnson. In the end, even Johnson was forced to acknowledge the writing on the wall and resigned, but with the proviso that he would remain as caretaker Prime Minister until his successor was appointed. This is due to be on the 5th of September, and it seems to have been an extraordinarily long time taking place. The first 8 candidates to put their names forward were effectively the last 8. 3 of them couldn't even raise enough votes from the parliamentary membership to proceed to the next round. Sajid Javid himself couldn't muster up enough support. Jeremy Hunt, runner-up to Boris Johnson in the 2019 leadership elections, also couldn't muster up enough support. Believe me, if Jeremy Hunt is what's seen as a centrist One Nation Tory these days and can't summon up enough support within the party, then heaven only knows where the Tory party is going. The third candidate was Rehman Shishti. Yes, I hear you ask. Who? Indeed, his own constituents and probably most of the Parliamentary Conservative Party were going, who? There is no bounds to Raymond's ambition. Unfortunately, there's also no bounds to his self-importance as well. He got nowhere. The remaining 5 candidates would, on the face of it, make the Conservative Party look like an extremely diverse body for gender, ethnicity, possibly even surpassing that of the Labour Party, which has yet to elect a female leader, for example. Unfortunately, all that diversity is just skin deep. Ultimately, they are Tories. Indeed, when you look at the remaining 5, it transpired just how dreadful Tories they were. Despite their skin colour, despite their alleged backgrounds, many of them held really quite unpleasant beliefs. Suella Braverman, the former Attorney General, for example, is one who basically feels that the rule of law is whatever the ruling party says it is. Indeed, there have been some moves on her part to ensure that her own civil servants are no longer permitted to tell the government what they believe is and isn't illegal. It is down to the rule of Suella. Kemi Badenoch is another one. She, despite being black, is one of those people who suppressed the recent racism report to the point where many of its authors felt that they could no longer attach themselves to it. It claimed that racism in this country still existed. The Conservative Party's spin on that was that no, there was no such thing as endemic racism in this country. Badenoch was one of the chief culprits at pushing that view. Which brings us down to the remaining 2 with just over a week to go. That's Rishi Sunak and Liz Truss. Liz Truss has so far looked as though she's going to win the leadership contest by a significant margin. She has, it seems, caught the ear of the 200,000 or so party members who will make the underlying decision to vote for whoever they wish to be Prime Minister. She has been throwing out tax cuts now, all sorts of anti-woke, whatever that's supposed to mean, rhetoric that appears to have been lapped up like red meat by these 200,000 Conservative Party members. It must be said that, unfortunately, as far as it's able to ascertain, these 200,000 Conservative Party members are in fact more white, male, wealthy, southern and far right leaning than the majority of Conservative voters, let alone the rest of the country. Rishi Sunak has not been able to make the same headway, and it looks as though he will be pushed back into second place and therefore probably out of government and maybe even out of Parliament if he chooses not to stay. Sunak's goal, despite being perhaps marginally the better of the two, has been to play the dour Thatcherite technocrat aiming for financial probity above all else. He's promised tax cuts, again, as all the candidates had to, but at a later date because he doesn't want to feed inflation. Neither of the candidates, of course, have shown any sign of addressing the real problems that are going to address the Conservative Party and the country as a whole. Indeed, that tsunami is already washing at the feet of the country as a whole, with energy costs, inflation not driven by wage rises but by external factors, and that this really could be another winter of discontent. Only this time it will be led by a Conservative government, not the Labour government the Tories have spent 50 years trying to blame for the last one. So here we are. Whoever wins, it is not going to be a good show unless they carry out a massive U-turn. Tory MPs are already quietly saying that whoever the leader is to be elected, Liz Truss or Rishi Sunak, even if it's Liz Truss, they are going to have to perform a major U-turn almost as soon as they hit office. They simply cannot allow it to drift the way it has been. Johnson, as caretaker Prime Minister, of course, has spent the last 6 or 7 weeks relishing the minutiae of his role and the fact that he's allowed to live at Chequers and places like that, getting a ride in the back seat of an RAF Typhoon at the International Air Tattoo, but not actually doing a great deal at all and fobbing it off for the next Prime Minister. He's made it quite clear that he doesn't want anything to do with this, that he believed he stabbed in the back, and unfortunately it would seem that the 200,000 loonies that make up the Conservative Party's electorate believe a stab in the back took place. It seems as though if there were 3 names put on the ballot form, Rishi Sunak, Liz Truss and Boris Johnson, over 50% of them would vote Boris Johnson back in immediately. There really is no convincing people, but it seems as though they are so made up with their annexation of what was a generally centrist Conservative Party up until fairly recently. They want to make the most of it, and that means we all have to suffer with their anti-European, anti-woke fantasies. Anyway, there's more to talk about. Let's see what the next little chat brings. It might be COVID. That's not gone away. It might be the energy crisis, something landed on us by the Russian invasion of Ukraine back in February, but that has probably been looming for quite a while because the Conservatives and the world generally seems unable to turn the COP26 proposals about needing to green up our energy supplies as soon as possible into solid action. It may well be inflation as well, which is fed by the energy crisis caused by the Russian invasion of Ukraine. But let's see. For now, have a think on this. Let's see who gets elected come 5th of September. I really don't think it's going to make much of a difference, even though I desperately wished it was when Johnson had resigned. But who knows? Perhaps they will, as those Tory MPs say, make a major U-turn once they actually get into power and see what is bearing down on them. Chin chin.